we now see the conversation Alencia had with her uncle, where he couldn't believe Jill was still alive, as he himself had pulverized her down to the bones. The next one to face danger would be Reif, who was imprisoned in a jail controlled by the enemy. Meanwhile, Jill appeared in a distant and strange place, so unusual that even water floated on the ceiling. There, a dark dragoness questioned the young girl, asking if she was the dragon's consort. The dragoness was puzzled, wondering what the current emperor was thinking by wanting to marry someone so young. However, noticing that Jill wasn't afraid of her presence, it was clear Jill wasn't an ordinary girl. At that moment, Jill realized she had been saved thanks to being teleported at the request of the Red Dragon. Considering her improved condition, it was clear why the Red Dragon had made such a request. Jill no longer had the golden ring nor felt the powerful magic within her, leading her to suspect she might have been cursed, her powers sealed, making her unworthy. And in this place, unworthy individuals ended up incinerated, which was how Jill nearly lost her life. However, being attacked by her savior made no sense, so Jill sought to understand why. The dragoness then revealed that they were in a dragon's nest, and a mere human wasn't allowed in such a place. Because of this, the dragoness considered Jill's fate sealed. When attacked, Jill seized the moment to move out of her line of sight and stumbled upon a piece of an eggshell with a trace of magic inside. Before we see Jill's plan, we return to Lawrence, who managed to hide the rest of the group from George. Credit also went to the teddy bear with laser eyes, which single-handedly destroyed half the enemies. Although strange, it wasn't worth overthinking since the bear, alongside the crazed chicken that controlled its attacks, would likely return soon. For now, the plan was to rest and think carefully about their situation. Reif, knowing his sister was a traitor, left them in a precarious position, practically without neutral allies. On the dragon side, returning to their location was impossible, which meant they had lost a crucial attacking force to secure victory. Still, Camila wanted to know if it was truly impossible to call them back, believing they wouldn't kill such important dragon. Unfortunately, Reif doubted this. His problem was that his dragon had been in a bad mood lately, and even if called, it might simply refuse to help. Worse, out of anger, it might fly so high that the lack of oxygen would affect their brains. For Camila and Z, this was the dreaded worst-case scenario. Returning to Reif's thoughts, he could only think of Jill, congratulating her and her siblings for being so useful all this time. However, the food was so bad that Reif almost rejected it, which infuriated R. Even so, R knew they couldn't stay angry with their favorite brother at that moment. Shiro also seemed happy with him, but since it felt too surreal, Reif woke up, realizing it was just a dream. Upon waking, his sister Alencia noticed he hadn't eaten in hours. Reif insisted there was no point in eating if they were going to cut his throat anyway. Alencia understood but still promised Reif that she and Bissell would do everything possible to convince their uncle to spare him. Reif, however, refused to accept pity, as pity wasn't tolerated by the Emperor of all Dragon. Returning to Jill, we see the Black Dragon questioning her about why she stopped the Emperor. Showing mercy to traitors only demonstrated weakness and naivety. The dragoness also pointed out that Jill's own power was sealed by the goddess, making her perhaps the least worthy of being a consort. Angered, the dragoness scolded Shiro for allowing Jill to approach the Emperor. Shiro refused to tolerate these words, but the dragoness fearlessly repeated that Shiro was too soft on Jill. However, Jill wanted to know more about who had sealed her magic. Upon confirming that it was the goddess, Jill asked if George's celestial sword was made from the same material as the goddess Kratos' ancient spear. The dragoness confirmed this, as it was the only material capable of sealing the Emperor's magic. Despite the seriousness of the conversation, Jill laughed, admiring her enemy's willingness to sacrifice part of herself for her cause. This made the dragoness realize Jill respected the goddess, further cementing her unworthiness. However, Jill, undeterred, vowed to save his majesty. She demanded the dragoness leave but reminded her that this was a dragon's nest and she was stronger. Preparing to attack again, the dragoness was caught off guard as Jill, tired of nonsense, leaped and used dragon magic to strike her down in one blow. Victorious, Jill took in the breathtaking view of the nest. The defeated dragoness began explaining that this was a dragon egg, appearing only when the dragon emperor is born. Dark in color, it always hatches with golden eyes, growing thanks to Reif, as the egg fed on his heart. It usually emerged after 10 years, but this one hadn't yet. Up to 20 years was acceptable, but if the emperor died before the egg hatched, it would turn into a monster, feeding on the emperor's hatred. Judging by how things were going, this seemed to be the goddess's plan, to curse the world after her death. The dreaded future Jill feared was drawing near. Determined, Jill went to the royal egg, promising to support it and never abandon it. This heartfelt promise was enough for the egg. Jill felt a heartbeat, and so did the dragoness, who confessed she had spent over 300 years guarding the egg alone. This was a special moment for her, but for Jill, it was sad, as the dragoness had been lonely for so long. Apologizing for striking her earlier, Jill expressed her regret. The dragoness acknowledged her own fault, admitting she had lost her sanity when the egg failed to hatch, nearly harming the true consort. Now that Jill was here, perhaps things could change, achieving it, and with Jay asking for her help to rescue Raid, the dragoness didn't know what to do with the egg. Although it complained about being alone, Jill knew that if it truly desired companionship, it could already be born. Since it didn't hatch, the plan to go after Raid was the one they followed. With the dragoness's permission, Jill was able to climb onto her, as the only ones allowed were the emperor and his consort. When Jill asked how they would exit, since there was water on the ceiling, the dragoness revealed that they simply needed to ascend high enough to realize that they had been under the sea. Upon emerging from it, the mission could begin. But before starting, Jill wanted to name the dragoness. Since Salteado, a character, had a food-related name, Jill decided to name her Filet, a suggestion immediately rejected. Now, with Reef, he was solely preoccupied with why Jill had forbidden him from killing his sister after having the perfect opportunity to do so. It was then that his sister assured him it was only because his wife pitted him, as the situation had turned such that he would have to eliminate his family out of obligation. However, this was meaningless to Reed, as he had never considered Alencia to be family. Despite his words, the woman knew forgiveness was not an option, but at least she understood Jill had every right to end her life. These words only reflected Alencia's desire for punishment, as she had failed to be a good older sister to Reef. Returning to her uncle, he continued searching for the fugitives. While discussing them, he was scolded by his sister for making a campfire, as it was extremely dangerous while being pursued by the enemy. Although they had not eaten, at least they had the food prepared by Reef, so there was no need to worry for now, until the distant sound of a dragon was heard. They realized they had been discovered, but fortunately, it was Jill, who appeared with a very peculiar dragon. In fact, it wasn't the only one, as the rest of the dragons were there to help them. A request from a black dragon overrode any personal issues. This left RT deeply grateful for the gesture, which pleased the dragoness, as at least he showed proper manners. To everyone's surprise, they could understand her words. Though her color was strange, it wasn't the most bizarre thing that day. At that moment, Salteado also appeared with Emperor Osido, meaning the entire group was reunited. And who better than Lawrence to devise a last-minute plan? Meanwhile, Alencia was informed by one of the guards that they were being attacked by a black dragon. This made it clear to Shiro and Reef that the dragon's consort had earned her position. From a distance, the attack came from our protagonists, where Rister had the duty of distracting the enemy as much as possible, thanks to having one of the best dragons. This gave Jill a clear path to confront Alencia. Although Alencia also tried to act as a distraction, she was unlucky, as there was anti-dragon magic preventing Reef from escaping. With no other choice, Lawrence ordered the black dragon to be guarded. Meanwhile, Jill still faced a powerful enemy who destroyed her sword, as Alencia declared she was entirely serious about saving her brother. But these words made no sense to Jill, as if Alencia truly wanted to save him, she only needed to side with them. Though Alencia's victory seemed clear, RT appeared, seeking explanations as to why it was so difficult for her to accept the true Dragon Emperor. This forced Lenny to save him from her uncle's attack, who had returned to attack. Rister, for his part, still wanted to know why his sister was doing all of this, which turned George against him. Although Rister accused George of being evil for burning innocent people, the man claimed he had no other choice, words that only angered the young man. However, due to the difference in power and George's sword, fighting was nearly impossible. Even Len had been discovered by George, as they should have already reached the capital. But Len had ordered more frequent rests out of personal indulgence. George brought out a special paper he had recently found, which revealed that Hades's mother, after giving birth to Las Abyssal, fell in love with her bodyguard. This meant Rister did not share the same bloodline. This revelation devastated Rister, as he realized how long this city had been deceived. If the information were true, many kings had unjustly ruled in a position that wasn't theirs. George, for his part, had no intention of correcting this and thought it best to end Raid once and for all. After all, if a false kingdom had functioned for so long, it might as well continue. Elin, meanwhile, knew that although they were devastated, her brother hadn't heard the truth yet, giving them some time to eliminate their uncle and prevent Reef from learning the truth. Of course, with his new sword, this would be nearly impossible. But Jill, knowing the future she had to prevent, challenged George to a duel. Before it began, Reef had managed to overcome the anti-dragon magic.